A man is about to enter a meeting at work when he realizes that he forgot some important paperwork. He calls home so that his wife can retrieve them. A strange woman answers. The guy asks, "Hello, who is this?" Confusion evident in his tone.
"This is the maid,"
answers the woman. "But we don't have a maid," exclaims the man.
"Oh, your wife just hired me this morning,"
explains the woman. "Well," replies the man, "this is her husband. Can I speak with her?" There's a brief pause before the maid responds, her voice a bit hesitant.
"Your wife is upstairs in the bedroom with another man. I just assumed it was her husband."
Fuming, the man yells, "Listen, go upstairs right now and yell to my wife that her husband just drove up in the driveway." The maid agrees and sets down the phone. Moments later, she picks the phone back up, her voice now frantic.
"Sir, I did as you asked, and the man jumped out of the bedroom window and missed the pool."
A stunned silence fills the line. The man finally asks, "Pool? Is this 310-6623? A man goes into a bar and has a couple of beers. Once he is done, the bartender tells him he owes $16. "But I paid already, don't you remember?" says the customer. "Okay," says the bartender. "If you said you paid, you did." The man then goes outside and tells the first person he sees that the bartender can't keep track of whether his customers have paid or not. The second man then rushes into the bar, orders a beer, and later pulls the same stunt. The bartender replies, "If you say you paid, I'll take your word for it." Soon, the customer goes into the street, sees an old friend, and tells him how to get free drinks. The man hurries into the bar and orders a beer. Suddenly, the bartender leans over to him and says, "You know, a funny thing happened in here tonight. Two men were drinking beer, neither paid, and both claimed that they did. The next guy who tries that is gonna get punched right in the nose." The final patron responds, "Don't bother me with your troubles. Just give me my change." A highway patrolman is patrolling a busy freeway, keeping an eye out for speeders and reckless drivers. Suddenly, he notices a car zooming past him, well above the speed limit. He quickly accelerates, pulling alongside the speeding vehicle. As he looks over, his eyes widen in disbelief. Behind the wheel is a blonde woman, completely focused on her task, knitting. The patrolman activates his flashing lights and siren, expecting the driver to pull over immediately. But the woman doesn't even glance in his direction. She is utterly oblivious to the chaos around her. The patrolman can't believe what he's seeing. He continues driving beside her with his lights on and his siren blaring, hoping to get her attention, but she remains unfazed. Determined to get her to stop, he rolls down his window, grabs his bullhorn, and shouts, "Pull over!" The blonde finally looks up from her knitting with a confused expression on her face. She seems to process his command for a moment, then shakes her head vigorously.
"No!"
she yells back.
"It's a scarf!"
A rich lawyer is approached by a famous charity organization. The man from the organization is concerned that the lawyer made over $10 million last year, but didn't donate even a cent to charity.
"First of all," says the lawyer, "my mother is sick and dying in the hospital, and it's not covered by healthcare. Second, I had 6 kids through 3 divorced marriages. Third, my sister's husband suddenly died, and she has no one to support her 4 children."
I'm terribly sorry, says the man from the charity organization. "I see your point. Now I feel bad about asking for money." The lawyer responds,
"Yeah, well, if I'm not giving them any money, why should I give you any?"
A woman gives birth to twin boys, but due to difficult circumstances, she has to give them up for adoption. One of the twins is adopted by a family in Egypt and is named Amal. The other is adopted by a family in Spain and is named Juan. Years pass, and she often wonders about her twins, hoping that one day they might be reunited. One day, she receives a letter in the mail. It's from Juan! Excitedly, she opens it and finds a heartfelt letter and a recent picture of Juan. She immediately shows the picture to her husband, her voice trembling with emotion.
Look, it's Juan! He's all grown up and looks so happy!
She exclaims. Her husband smiles warmly and says, "That's wonderful, dear. It's so nice to see him after all these years." As she carefully places the picture in a frame, she sighs and says,
I wish I had a picture of Amal, too. I'd love to see what he looks like now.
Her husband gently pats her shoulder and tells her, "Honey, they're twins. If you've seen one, you've seen 'em all." A woman finds herself in an affair with her husband's best friend. One afternoon, as they're lying in bed together, they are interrupted by the shrill ring of the phone. Since they are at the woman's house, she reaches over to pick up the receiver. Her lover, lying beside her, listens intently, only able to hear her side of the conversation.
Hello? Oh, hi. I'm so glad that you called. Really? That's wonderful. Well, I'm happy to hear you're having such a great time. Oh, that sounds terrific. Love you too. Okay, bye-bye.
The woman hangs up the telephone with a serene smile. Curiosity gets the better of her lover, and he asks, "Who was that?"
Oh,
She replies with a nonchalant shrug.
that was just my husband telling me about the wonderful time he's having. On his fishing trip with you.
A very successful farmer from Texas becomes curious about his ancestry. After some research, he discovers that his roots trace back to a small town in Ireland where his ancestors were also farmers. Excited, he decides to visit the town to learn more about his heritage. After arriving in Dublin and driving for an hour, he stops at a local pub to get a drink and hopefully gather some information about his family. The Texan sits down at the bar, orders a pint, and strikes up a conversation with an Irishman sitting next to him. He shares his story and explains why he's there. The Irishman responds,
Well, I've never heard of your family, but I'm a farmer too. What's farming like in Texas?
The Texan replies, "Farming in Texas has been very good to me. If you start driving west from my property in the morning, you'll drive all day without reaching the end. And if you drive east the next day, you still won't reach the end. The same goes for driving north or south all day." The Irishman nods and says,
Ah, I know what you mean. I've got a tractor like that as well.
A man gets home early from work and catches his wife in bed with another man. The husband challenges the other man to an old-fashioned duel with his handguns. Whoever manages to shoot first and kill the other gets his wife. The other man agrees, so they go into another room so the wife doesn't have to see it. Once in the other room, the husband turns to the other man and says,
Why should either of us have to die? We will both fire a shot into the air and lay on the ground as if we are dead. When she comes in, she will see our lifeless bodies and rush to one of us. Whoever she chooses can have her.
The other man agrees again, so they fire into the air and collapse. The wife throws the door open and peers down at the two men, then backs out of the room and calls out, "Darling, you can come out, they're both dead!" A newly married sailor is stationed on a remote island in the Pacific for a year. A few weeks after he arrives, he begins to miss his new wife. So he writes her a letter. "My love," he writes, "we are going to be apart for a very long time. Already I'm starting to miss you, and there's really not much to do here in the evenings. Besides that, we're constantly surrounded by attractive young native girls. Do you think if I had a hobby of some kind, I would not be tempted?" A few days later, he receives a package from his wife. He quickly opens it and finds a harmonica inside with a note that reads,
Why don't you learn to play this?
Eventually, his tour of duty comes to an end and he rushes back to his wife. "Darling," he says, "it's been so long. I can't wait to make passionate love with you again." She kisses him, then says,
Okay, honey, but first, let's see you play that harmonica.
Two old friends are sitting on a bench in the park, enjoying the sunshine and the gentle breeze. As they reminisce about their younger days, the conversation naturally shifts to the topic of getting older. "You know," says the first man, leaning back and stretching his legs, "women sure have all the luck when it comes to getting older." His friend raises an eyebrow, curious.
What do you mean by that?
He asks, turning to face him. "Well," says the man with a sigh, "I can't remember the last time I was able to make love to my wife. My health's been going downhill, and it just doesn't seem possible anymore. But my wife, on the other hand, she's healthier than ever."
Healthier? How's that even possible?
His buddy wonders aloud, genuinely puzzled. "Well," the man explains, "she hasn't had a headache in years." After 37 years of marriage, Jack dumped his wife for his young secretary. His new girlfriend demanded that she should live in Jack's luxurious house. Since Jack's lawyers were of a higher caliber, he received the house in the divorce. He gave his ex-wife Emma 3 days to move out. She spent the first day packing her belongings into boxes, crates, and suitcases. On the second day, she had the movers come and collect her things. On the third day, she sat down for the last time at their beautiful dining room table by candlelight. Then she put on some soft background music and feasted on a pound of shrimp, a jar of caviar, and a bottle of Chardonnay. After she finished, she went into each and every room and deposited a few half-eaten shrimp shells dipped in caviar into the hollow of the curtain rods. She then cleaned up the kitchen and left. When the husband returned with his new girlfriend, all was bliss for the first few days. Then slowly, the house began to smell of rotting shrimp. They tried everything, cleaning, mopping, and airing the place out. Vents were checked for dead rodents, and carpets were steam cleaned. Air fresheners were hung everywhere. Exterminators were brought in to set off gas canisters, during which they had to move out for a few days. In the end, they even paid to replace the expensive wool carpeting. Nothing worked. People stopped coming over to visit. Repairmen refused to work in the house. The maid quit. Finally, they couldn't take the stench any longer and decided to move. A month later, even though they had cut their price in half, they could not find a buyer for their stinky house. Word got out, and eventually even the local realtors refused to return their calls. Finally, they had to borrow a huge sum of money from the bank to purchase a new place. The ex-wife called the man and asked how things were going. He told her the saga of the rotting house. She listened politely and said that she missed her old home terribly. In fact, she would be willing to reduce her divorce settlement in exchange for getting the house back. Assuming his ex-wife had no idea how bad the smell was, he agreed on a price that was about 10% of what the house had been worth, but only if she were to sign the papers that very day. She agreed, and within the hour, his lawyers delivered the paperwork. A week later, the man and his girlfriend stood smiling as they watched the moving company pack everything to take to their new home. including the curtain rods.